Right, we do thin out when the kids go, don't we? There's big gaps in the front. That's fair enough. It feels like I was sat amongst the young folk, which makes me feel good. Right, so, yeah, my name's Adam, or Del, either way. So I'm going to talk a little bit about telling a story. I suspect I'm stood right in the middle of that. So there we go, slightly more out of the way. I'm just going to talk about something I felt kind of God put on my heart maybe a few weeks ago really now, and then over the past week, and certainly 2 weeks really, that I think he's really kind of developed, because I think September is a good time. You get probably a couple of times a year, I think, that you can kind of take a step back and kind of just really kind of, apart from the kind of busyness of life, and life can kind of just take you along with it, and you kind of just get dragged along. Before you know it, you're kind of in the middle of terms if you've got kids or work, and you can kind of do it for me at New Year and kind of over the summer when people are going back to September. I realise those of us who don't have kind of kids or things like that, we don't really think about kind of New Year necessarily if we don't work in schools as September. So you might kind of just think, well, I kind of work to January, you have a bit of a break there. And it's a good time to kind of maybe just take a step back and really think about our lives. And I think I tell loads of stories whenever I speak. I'm a lecturer in accountancy, yeah, imagine that. And so I tell a lot of stories, because you've got to, because if you don't tell a story, like every 4 minutes people are just asleep. But you can see them on their phones, because I teach adults, so I can't even say, oi, 35-year-old man, get off your phone. It's just a bit weird. You lose them very quickly. So I love stories, and I just think God's kind of put it on my heart to kind of look at how we live out our lives as if it was a story. And recently, I went to the 2020 cricket finals day, which is a good day. You get 3 cricket matches. Some of you will hate cricket, but cricket's quite posh, and I'm not that posh. And so 4 or 5 of us went down from work, and we got these tickets. And we went down, and we were driving down, and we're not massive cricket fans, but we kind of know a bit. And we didn't really know who we were going to support, because there's 2 semis and a final. So there's 4 teams, and so we're hoping one of them was a northern team. And so the week before, they'd had all the quarterfinals in Lancashire, which is as close as you can get. There isn't a Cheshire or a Merseyside, because I work in Liverpool. So we thought Lancashire's our team. They lost by 1 run, so that ruined it. So there's 4 southern teams. And we're like, well, that's not a choice, is it? So we discussed in the car who we didn't want to support. And there was Essex. Well, that's a clear no. So there's no way you're supporting Essex. We've got standards. And so we're like, Essex have gone. Clearly Essex are out of there. And we met a lot of folks from Essex at that place. And we were like, that was a right call. There was just one massive shirtless bloke pouring beer down himself. That's right, we're not with Essex. And so then there was Surrey, which is a no for a very different reason. No shirtless men walking around pouring beer down himself. A lot of posh people. And that's fine. If you live in Surrey, it's very nice. If you're from Surrey, very nice. But again, we can handle that. So all we knew is it's not those 2 teams, for very different reasons. Surrey like the Man United of cricket as well. So we went, and we watched a couple of semi-finals. So in the Essex one, we were cheering for the opposition, Northants against Essex, which was fine. But then in the Surrey one, we just thought, we'll cheer for the other team. And so my mate, who's 6'4", hard to miss, a big Widnesian fella, not the most subtle of human beings, the champ went round in the kind of more loud stand. Now, we weren't in the loud stand. My boss had bought the tickets, and he is a bit posh. And so he bought quite expensive tickets in a very kind of middle-classy kind of area. And the champ went round, stand up if you hate Surrey. Now, my mate didn't realise we effectively sat in the Surrey stand at this point. And so he kind of just stands up on his own. There is nobody, 2,000 people in this stand. He stood up like, Sharrett. That is not going to end well for us, is it? And so thankfully, obviously, cricket's quite nice, so there's not trouble in that sense. But the game finishes, and these people, so obviously we're cheering for every 4 that the opposition are getting and all this kind of stuff. And then in the end, the team we're supporting loses. And these blokes come up to us at the end and kind of go up to my mate and say, stand up if you hate Surrey, eh? And start giving him abuse and start calling him these names. We're going to get in a fight. And so what we do, why are you cheering against my team? We had to kind of explain that we don't really support anybody. We're not looking for a fight, honest, because this was a big fella. And there was 5 of us, and we thought, we'll probably take him. But that's not what we've come for. This poor couple sat next to us, and they're just this husband and wife, and they're like, we haven't come for this. And the husband goes to us, sat next to you, we're going to get in a fight. I hope not. But we are sat with this 6'4" fella, so who knows? And so that was fine. Then we got to the final, so obviously everybody knew we were against Surrey. And so we got these cardboard hats, cardboard cricket hats, classy. And so you go around, and they took about 20 minutes to put together. So we've got these hats on supporting the other team. But because my 6'4" mate is a giant, He's comes with a giant head. That's the territory. And so he's got this on his head, and so we're cheering for the opposition. And as he's cheering, he stands up and like someone's gone, and the wind takes this hat. And like, it is just like the story you couldn't imagine, because about 20 rows down is this bloke who's come up to us and called him all these names. And so this hat just blows off and it flies. We're like, no, don't you dare. Don't you dare go 2 rows in front of 20 down. There he goes, plops in his lap. Like, you're joking. This guy looks round and my mate's like, that was the wind! Honestly, it was the wind! And no, after in the mid-session interval, he came up to us again. We're like, look, honestly, it's the wind. We're not throwing paper hats at you. And so we left the cricket. And the first thing we told everybody about was like, how was the cricket? We're like, oh, guess what happens? And that was it. Forget the cricket. Who cares? Northants won. That's what we turned out. So good. Sorry, didn't win. But we kind of, as soon as things happen, that's the first thing that we were going to talk about. And in the story, there's a guy who writes a book about kind of telling stories, and he kind of defines a story as a character who wants something and has to overcome conflict in order to get it. And if you're watching any kind of film, that's kind of normally, obviously there's more to films than that, but in a kind of basic plot, certainly when I watch films with Anna and we watch these kind of romantic films, you can almost guarantee there's a character who wants love, maybe 2 characters who wants love. Hey, how about that? Then there's conflict, and then something's happened. Now there's a breakup, or there's a comedy misunderstanding, then they get back together. Always happens. You can set your watch by them. But every time in the middle, Anna hates it. She would skip that conflict. She would go from 2 people who want to find love. That's it. It's not really a story. I try and tell her every time. I say, it'll be alright, it'll be alright. No, I don't like the conflict. Why does this have to happen in the middle? That's kind of essential to a story. But in life, we don't want that. We don't want the conflict. You know, when Jesus says follow us, we want, right, okay, Jesus, we'll follow you, and it'll be great. We get to be in heaven with him. But actually, you know, Jesus never promises us a life without conflict. He never promised that to his disciples. He said, look, if you're going to follow me, you need to take up your cross and follow me. And actually, we kind of live in this place and we go on this journey where actually following Jesus comes with loads of things that have a cost. Okay, so we're going to look at just a few verses written by one of his disciples, really at the end of his life, really, which is John. He's not a guy that we need read loads of verses about, particularly, but he wrote 5 books. So he wrote 1, 2, 3 John, he wrote the Gospel of John, he wrote Revelation. Now John was the kind of pretty much the last surviving guy. So a lot of the disciples, they get scattered at times, a lot of them get killed. So John's kind of at the end of his life when he writes this book. And he writes this book, 1 John. We're not going to look at the Gospel of John yet, but there's quite a lot of verses which will hopefully come up on the screen. I didn't realise that there was a junket in the way, so you won't read all of these particularly easily, I don't think. So the first verse we're going to read is from 1 John chapter 2. It's from the Message version, which is a different version from what I've got, so that's good. So better on this version, this one. And he says, don't love the world's ways, don't love the world's goods. Love of the world squeezes out love of the Father. It's practically everything that goes on in the world. Wanting your own way, wanting everything for yourself, wanting to appear important. There's nothing to do with the Father, it just isolates you from him. The world and all that's wanting is on its way out. But whoever does what God wants is set for eternity. So he's kind of come to the end of his life and he's seen amazing things. He's obviously seen really difficult things. We'll see in Acts 12, his brother gets killed. So this is a guy who knows pain. You know, he's not been promised this nice, easy ride by Jesus. And at the end of his life, he writes this book. And in this book, he's just so determined to tell his people what really matters. And he's saying, look, forget wanting all this stuff. He's like, this man speaks with authority, knowing he's seen kind of life. He's at the end. He's seen his journey with Jesus, and he knows he wouldn't trade it for anything. And if we go through, there's a few more verses. There's just another one in 1 John chapter 3. So we'll just see in this book, I'm just going to pick out loads of verses which are kind of saying the same sort of stuff. So, here we go. 1 John 3, chapter 11. We'll see there, for this is a message you've heard from the beginning, that we should love one another. And then later on he says, by this we know love, that he laid down his life for us, and we ought to lay down our lives for the brothers. But if anyone has the world's goods and sees his brother in need, yet closes his heart, how does God's love abide in him? Little children, let us not love in word or in talk, but in deed and in truth. He goes on, there's a couple more. We're going to start seeing a theme. And this is his commandment, that we believe in the name of his Son Jesus Christ, and love one another, just as he has commanded us. And there's more. Oh, that's a long one. Dear friends, let us love one another, for love comes from God. Everyone who loves has been born from God and knows God. Whoever does not love does not know God, because God is love. And then it goes on to just tell about the love that we found in Jesus. And then the final one, we've got there. He finishes, and the final verse of it is like, "Dear children, keep yourself from idols." And he knows the distractions that come with life. He knows the distractions come from wanting stuff. And over and over and over again in this book, he says, like, love God and love each other. He says, and in this book, he just constantly goes on about the gospel and what Jesus did. And then he constantly says, look, we've been told, it's not a new message. Jesus told us to love one another, to love one another, to love one another. Because he knows that actually, if we start to do that with all the kind of costs and the difficulties that come, we'll start to get hold of what it actually means to follow Jesus and what it actually means to be a Christian. And the guy who wrote the stuff about stories, he's got a great quote, which is there. And he says about living out stories that matter. He says it's got to be connected to love. It's got to be relational. It's got to be sacrificial. Those are the great stories. And that is, if we're going to love people, okay, it's got to obviously be relational, but of course it's got to be sacrificial. And Jesus, when he called John and when he called the other disciples, he didn't give them this big promise of exactly what would happen. But he knew that in them there was this desire to live for more. And I think as those of us who certainly have jobs that maybe, dare I say, are a little bit more mundane at times, and I can only speak for the rest of you because I'm an accountancy lecturer, so there's nothing mundane in my life. It's all just like, it's like paragliding every day. And so obviously, most of us do have those days where it's just mundane, you know, but ultimately God says, you know what, you can live for more than that. You might still have to do those mundane jobs, but they are not your life. You know, your jobs, you might have to work hard at things, but there are times and things that God can call us to, and things that God can cause to be with people that will matter so much more than all that stuff and all the stuff that we do. And it can get a drain. I remember a few years ago I kind of did a lot of youth work, and it's tough when you sit in the midst, and we're going to look at some of the things that can get in the way of living like this. And one of the things is kind of like discouragement and difficulty. And I remember I was kind of thinking, right, well, I'm doing this kind of youth work with these kids, and I just don't know what I can do anymore. And I was just tired, and I remember just kind of writing down, and I was just trying to think, what can I do if this was, and I just remember writing, like, if this was a film, what would like the lead character would do something? He'd do something big, he'd do something grand, it would work. And I remember writing just next to it, yeah, but life's not a film, and I'm not a hero. And I remember as I wrote that, it became like the story of my life for like 18 months, 2 years, and I was like, just got this reality of like, it don't really matter. I can do my best, but it's not really going to make a difference. And it really kind of echoed throughout me, and I thought, it doesn't have to be that way. It doesn't have to be the truth that actually, you know, your life's not going to really matter and it's just tough, and that's kind of it, do your best. You know, God calls us actually to tell stories of our lives, and those stories will count, you know, if we really try and follow Him. And there'll be those times when we feel like that and we think, oh, you know what, God, it might be other people can tell these stories, but, you know, I'm just a guy who lives in Liverpool and just is an accountant, and I'm trying, and that's kind of it. And we can let things get in, and we can let that kind of lies, and kind of, if we're believing that God has called us to live stories, we're going to believe that there's an enemy who doesn't want us to live that way. He doesn't want us to live sacrificially. He wants us to close the doors and think, I can't do this. Stick the TV on and just think, you know what, this is fine, I'm comfortable with this. Because if He can get us to do this, well then ultimately no one's going to see any people who follow Christ. And no one's going to know what it is to follow Christ. And so, we're going to look at a few things that can get in the way and cause us to really have those kind of lies sitting in our hearts. The first thing that we're going to look at, we're going to run through these relatively quickly, is distraction. Okay, so here we're on a brand new journey in a church. So we obviously, this is the first day of being where we are. But the danger is that if, as part of this, we can think, oh, we're part of this church. The church is doing new stuff. So if I'm part of this church that's doing new stuff, I can just come along and actually Lucas will tell me what kind of new stuff we're going to do, and I can be part of that and I can get involved. Okay, it's not Lucas's job to tell us what God's asking us to do. It's not Lucas's job to tell me what to get passionate about. It's not Lucas's job to tell me who God's created me to be. You know, it's not his job to do that for everybody. You go, ultimately, just coming here is not going to be enough. You know, what Lucas and Sarah, I'm sure, will want is people coming up to him and say, do you know what, I'm really passionate about this. I really care about these people or these people in my life. He would love it if he was just bombarded with people who've just got a heart for various things and various people. You know, rather than him going, we want to do this, but I've got to now go and ask for some volunteers, I've got to ask people. You know, he wants people who know what it is to just take a step back, to listen to God, and to really understand what God wants in our life. And we know through the busyness and through tiredness or whatever it is, that we can kind of miss that. And if we just kind of plod through life, we could be in that place thinking, well, I haven't really got any kind of desires or visions. God hasn't really put anything in my heart. Because we're kind of living day to day, getting the tasks done that need to be done. And I've been there just this year, like when we started the church, me and Anna wanted to move to Latchford before we came. And to be honest, I wasn't massively keen on it, but we did. At that time, we moved here. And for 5 months we didn't have a church, and we kind of visited churches, and 5 months just sounds like nothing. 5 months was rubbish, like for me. I found it really tough. That's a long time to just turn up to somewhere, listen to a sermon, sometimes good, sometimes not, listen to some music, sometimes good, sometimes not, but not really connected with anybody. And 5 months, and I was like, I think we're going to plant a church. And I was thinking, I'm not in a place to plant a church. Like, I don't even, like, I haven't got any people. It's like me and Anna and a few friends that we haven't got people around us. How are we going to plant a church? And then Lucas came and said, I think I might want to plant a church. I was like, okay, Anna was right. So at the time I was thinking, for 5 months I was like, I can't do this. And then Lucas was like, right, well, we're going to do stuff, and you and Anna will probably do some of the youth work, which at that time I was like, that's kind of a little bit of like a default, because we were the only people who didn't really have kids. And so we're going to be the youth pastors, that's how it works, isn't it? And I was thinking, but I'm tired from the youth work that I'd done before that didn't kind of work. And I was thinking, I'm not sure I've got that passion for it. And then I got into work, and I was working in Liverpool and driving from Warrington, and I was tired, and I was like, God, you've got all this stuff that people are doing, and I just haven't got that excitement. I'm living day to day. And I remember saying to God, like, can't I just be a good teacher, supporting Anna in what she wants to do with YFC, going to the church, being there for people? Isn't that enough? I remember God going, no. And he said no, because I know, and there were times when we have to batten down the hatches and work hard, and I realise there's plenty of people that with tough jobs, and there will be definite seasons where it takes all it takes to really do well at your job and be the best witness you can be in that work. And absolutely, I understand that without question. But I know that God said no for me, because there's another slide coming up. That months earlier, God had told me, don't worry, you don't need that focus particularly. God had told me earlier the things that he was putting on my heart to be, the things I wanted to be as a man, the things that I felt he was calling me into. And I had done something which I need to do, otherwise I never get anything done. I'd written it down, and I'd put it out there, and I'd kind of done this kind of thing. It's called kind of storyline, which is a bit like a to-do list, but you kind of look at the areas in your life that you think God's calling you to. And I thought God was calling me to do some work like fatherless young lads, and things like getting involved in a discipleship group, and things like writing some stuff down. And I knew that God had asked me to do these things, and this was not only what God had asked me to be, but also the kind of man that I wanted to be, and the kind of man that I wanted to get towards. But to do that, all of that takes effort. None of that comes naturally. Because if I just get up, go to work hard, come home, relax, none of that's getting done. Because all of that has to be done in my own time, as it were. You know, the only one of those goals that, and there's some tips on there, so you'll see that I've started to kind of walk towards those. But it was really tough, and I'd let that go for like 9 months. And as I looked at it, I was just embarrassed, because I really believed that God told me to do a lot of that stuff. And I looked at the progress on it, and I was like, no, I can't just be just the best accountancy lecturer in the world, in my eyes. I can't just do that. That's not enough, because God doesn't want that. He wants me to do these things, and it'll be different for everybody. It doesn't have to be big tasks. It can just be people. You know, it can just be that there's a couple of people in your life that God wants you to be there for. You know, I've got a friend of mine who I texted. I really felt God wanted me to text recently. Just we were in church in the other place, and it was just a song, and I really felt this song lyric, like, he is Jesus, and all my hope is in him. I just felt it was for him for no reason. I don't really text him with that kind of stuff often. And I texted him that, and he just said, why did you text me? I just said, I thought it was right for you. And he said, and he just said to me, he said, well, today was the day that my wife decided she was stopping coming to church. And I was like, oh, you know, like, I've got people like that in my life. It doesn't have to be a big project, but I can't just text him and say it's going to be all right. If I care about that guy, he's not living near us, he lives a few hours away. I need to drive. I need to sit with him, we need to chat together, I need to hear his heart, we need to pray together. Because me sending him an email or a text, it's not enough. You know, if we're going to really love people, I can't just love people. I mean, I can send him emails and texts, and there's plenty of times that's good. But I've got to show him that if I love him, and he matters, I've got to be there. You know, and it doesn't have to be big projects, but for it to be a story that works, it has to be people. So John writes this over and over again about loving people, getting in front of people, getting around people. And the second thing that we've got, and we'll skip through some of these a bit quicker, is uncertainty. None of us like uncertainty. I'm an accountant, I don't like uncertainty. In one sense, we like to know the ending, but actually if someone was telling us a story, we don't want to know the ending. Like, I don't know if anyone remembers years ago when the film Titanic came out, before we had actually proper cinemas with loads of screens, like you would have to literally queue around the block to get in. And I remember as a youth group, we would queue into, we'd all gone together to see Titanic. Imagine what a treat that was. And so we queued up to see a 3-hour film about a boat that sinks and a boat that dies. And it was rubbish. And but we couldn't get in because they cut the queue. And so you stood there and they went down the queue and they're like, anyone behind here is not getting in. And so we were like, oh, well, fair enough, we'll have to come back another day. No big loss. And so but some guy in the queue was a bit like in your face. Which, looking back, that's a bit of a weird attitude. But my mate who'd already seen the film, he'd gone with his girlfriend separately. He thought, I'm not having this. And he went, all right, mate, he dies. Enjoy the film. And people went mad. The queue were like, what? What are you doing, ruining it for us all? Like, oh. So I'm just surrounded by people who get us into fights. And so that is my life. Anna has never got me into a fight yet. So it's good. So when someone tells a story, we don't want to know the end. We want it to unfold. But in our life, we kind of want that certainty. We're like, come on, Jesus, just at least tell me how it's going to end, or the next few things. Because uncertainty means we have to have faith. We don't like uncertainty. I don't like putting myself out there because I like control. But actually, this whole journey, being here as a church, Anna kind of dreamed when we started this that maybe we'd meet one day in a school, but it wasn't a detailed plan. We thought, oh, it'd be great if that happened. We didn't know what was going to happen. We didn't know when we opened the doors if anyone would even come. We just started a church, and people like Lucas and Sarah particularly, they just said, right, well, I'm going to leave work. And it's uncertain, there's no guarantee. We've not got tons of money. He's not earning a fortune from us here. Trust me on that one. And so there's a whole world of uncertainty. But if we're going to live those stories, sometimes we need to go, right, do you know what, God, I'm going to follow you. I don't know what the end is, but you've called me to do something. Like God's called me to do something mental with these young lads. And the problem with that is, I don't know how that's going to end. I don't know the details of it yet, and I don't like it. But I can sit there and go, all right, God, well, until you provide more details, I'm not really going to do much. Or I need to make this step and start going, right, do you know what? If this matters, if I believe that God can actually do something in the lives of these young people and I can help, well, I need to start making steps towards it. Even if I don't know how it's going to finish and I don't know the details. So inconvenience and uncertainty. The third one is inconvenience. We hate inconvenience because it is going to be awkward. It's going to take our time. It's going to take our energy. Because that's what loving people does. I can think of all the times that in my life when things have been tough, and so many people have just gone out of their way, whether that's driving, whether that's spending time with me, and it's cost them, because that's what loving people does, It's all good to sit down with your mates and watch the football when life's good, but when life's tough, it's really difficult. Like when I go and see this guy, his wife started going to church, I don't know what to say. I've never done that before. It goes back to the uncertainty. I don't know that road, but I just got to go there, and I've got to put myself out there, and I've got to sit there with him and say, do you know what, it might be inconvenient, we might not know, but ultimately that's how we show that we care for people, when it's not just on our way, when it's not part of our day-to-day thing, it will just disrupt us. But we don't like it, it's inconvenient. The fourth one, almost like a plant there, it's good man, is failure. And failure is a tough one. I think there's a lot of us that probably would have experienced this, and we will kind of know the hurt that comes from failure. And just as much as failure is an issue, the fear of failure is as big an issue as anything. Because when you open up living your life like this, if I open up thinking, if God's told me to do some mentoring of fatherless guys, I could mess that up. Straight away I can mess that up. If you give me stuff like an admin task, fine. If I mess that up and make a couple of mistakes, no one cares. But if I'm getting involved in the lives of people, well actually it could go wrong. People could walk away, people could not like it, people could not like me, I could do a bad job at it. And so all these thoughts, all these fears come in, which are not meant to be there from God, but that fear of rejection, that actually we're going to be not good enough and we're going to mess up, they will let us kind of be robbed of what God would have us do. That's a very real thing. And the importance when you get to this kind of fear of failure is you need to have people around you. And you need to say, do you know what, I think I'm meant to do this, but I don't know how, and it scares me. Because as soon as you start telling people, for me, it becomes real. If you just think it's in your heart and leave it and go, I don't know what to do with that, God, you can kind of bury it because you're so afraid it might go wrong and you might fail. It might not kind of go. It might not go right. But in all that passage there that we've got with John and stuff, never once does he tell you, do you know what, guys, you need to be a success, you need to be successful. He calls us to love. He doesn't call you to be a success. He calls you to love people. And we see it with the disciples. They make mistakes. They make plenty of mistakes. And we see the heart of God is to welcome them back and to go with them as they go on. And the final one that we've got is pain, which is obviously very linked to failure, and it's painful. Loving people is hard because people aren't always great. People are a bit annoying at times. I wouldn't want to love some of the things that I do at the times. I look at the person that I was, and I hate whenever we go. I don't hate going home. I realise this is being recorded. My mum's going to watch this. I don't hate going home. I love going home, Mum. But when I go home and we go there for Christmas or whatever, I'm going to redeem this quickly. People always say to me, "Oh, you wouldn't have liked him when he was a teenager. You wouldn't have liked him." And I find it that really difficult, and I understand why, because I understand that I was not an easy teenager, but I genuinely was trying to wrestle with this kind of people telling me that if I followed Jesus, it would be alright, and actually wrestle with, but in my heart it's not alright, like I'm trying, it's not getting any better, and it still hurts, and so it's difficult knowing that that was part of my journey, and people going, I wouldn't have liked him, because it wasn't nice to like me. And there was a couple of people when I was there that stood with me, even though it wasn't particularly nice. A couple of people just wouldn't give up on me, because loving people is painful. And if we're going to be involved with any people, certainly if I'm going to do anything to do with these fatherless lads, I'm not going to be there thinking it's going to be this nice sweet ride and go, wow, you want to mentor me? Oh, that's great, that's exactly what I've been looking for. Life is now perfect. Okay, these guys are going to be carrying pain, they're going to be carrying anger, and at times they're probably going to get really angry with me and really frustrated with me. And I've got to be prepared to know that, and in the middle of that, instead of kind of just going, do you know what, it's too painful, God, this is where, for me, we need to know that we're doing it because God's called us to do it. Because otherwise it's just pain, it's just working hard with no real reason. And it's good to do good things, of course it is. But when pain comes, if we don't know it's from God, when pain comes, the natural thing will be to shy away and go, I don't want to do this, God. It's too hard, it hurts too much. But if we know it's from God, then actually we will be able to lift our eyes and say, okay, God, this hurts. But if we look to Jesus and we look at the pain in Gethsemane, we look at the pain on the cross, we look at the pain of people walking away as he just taught them. We have a God who knows that pain, who knows what it is to have people walk away. And people will do, there's no guarantee that as you share the gospel, everyone will respond. We don't see that anywhere in the Bible. People walked away from Jesus. We can't expect that automatically we're going to share a message and everyone's going to go, that's amazing, I'm in. We've got to be prepared that people may reject the message, people may really walk away. And John knows the pain, as we said. He's seen all the disciples go through difficult times. He's been in prison, he's seen people die. But he knows that actually when pain comes, he's doing it for a reason. And actually the kind of glory and actually the kind of joy that comes from serving God and knowing God and feeling God move through you as you live it out overweighs all of that pain. There's a great kind of charity that I think the next screen has on there. I talk about this quite a lot. There was a guy years ago, he never meant to set up a charity. He set up this charity called To Right Love in Our Arms, but basically he was a guy and a bunch of guys in the church, and they became aware of this girl who was in real trouble. She was struggling with drugs, she was self-harming, she was suicidal, and they met her, and the day they met her, she just kind of like cut her arms, and she wrote loads of horrible stuff about herself in her arms, and he looked at her, and he just was like, we've got to do something. So for like 4 days, they kind of just looked after her, they just went with her, they took her out, they took her for coffee, they took her to concerts, they just hung out with her, they loved her, they prayed with her, and he said, I don't know what to do next, and they got her into rehab. But the problem is they couldn't really afford rehab. So what he did is he started telling the story to people. He started selling T-shirts with To Right Love in Our Arms on it, just to raise money to put her through rehab. And as he did it, he found that people were like all over the place, were lonely and were hurting and were struggling with kind of depression and self-image and stuff like that. And as he did that, it turns out that people just listened to this story and were like, that's me, I need that help. And he was like, my goodness, and it just became such a bigger thing than he ever thought. And it came from seeing somebody's pain and going, I can't walk away from that. I can't just do nothing. I don't know what I'm going to do. It's got uncertainty, it's got fear. But I'm just going to sit here, I'm going to love this girl, and we're going to do what we can. And he's got a couple of great quotes here there. And he says that in their vision, it says, you need to know rescue is possible, that freedom is possible, that God is still in the business of redemption, and that we're seeing it happen. And as you go through that difficulty, as it's inconvenient, if you know that that is the truth, that freedom is possible, and that you know that God is still in the business of redemption, well, that is stuff that fuels you. That is stuff that keeps you going, knowing that God has called you to do this. And that second quote that I will say in almost every preach I ever do, because I come back to it over and over again in my life when I want to give up and things are tough. We make to be lovers, bold in broken places, pouring ourselves out again and again until we're called home. This is a guy who knows Jesus, who's desperate to follow him, whatever it costs. And it's costing him a lot, and it's not always an easy journey, but he talks about the fact that the vision is people just putting down kind of like blades and bottles and guns and people who know that actually they can't be replaced, and that there's always hope and there's always time to go on. And but as we do that, we know that we've got to stand in that pain with people. Now, I think beyond that, I think it just flicks back a little on the next screen. So if we leave it on that for a second now. Obviously, we looked there at quite a lot of reasons why it's difficult to live a story, and that's not meant to be a negative preach, and we've kind of gone through that deliberately to kind of get to the point where actually, we don't need to think, right, well, it's going to be tough, isn't that bad? Because there's a song by Ren Collective where it says, we counted up the cost, and you are worth it. And it's important that we know the cost, and we don't try and sell some kind of myth that, we hear these testimonies, and these testimonies are great, that people kind of, I had really loads of problems, my life was tough, I met Jesus and it's okay, and that's great, but you never hear that much about the after. Like, great, I believe that life is great with Jesus, but I want people to tell me the story of what's happened. Why is it different? Why is it great? I can't just tell my story of being difficult as a teenager, because that was like 15, 16 years ago. And if I've got no story to tell since then, you've got a question like, really, would God be that great? If I've got nothing to say after 15, well, I'm 31 now. I've got 16 years of walking with God where I can tell stories of His grace and His goodness and His faithfulness. And of course there's been difficult times. Right? We've got to tell those stories. Actually, life with God is not just things are bad and now things are fine. We've got to tell people why we follow God and why it matters. And John, as he writes his gospel, I think it's something that's really interesting as I was doing this. There's obviously 4 gospels. The other 3 were written first. And John was one of the 3 closest people to Jesus. And he writes some stories in his gospel that are not in any of the other 3. There's loads of stuff that is in the other 3. And there's loads of stuff that's in all the gospels, of course. But he writes 4 stories that we can't find in the other 3. That he knows because he was there. He hasn't heard them through word of mouth. He was just there. And the first one he writes is the woman at the well. Some woman who's got loads of husbands, has had loads of husbands, and she's rejected. She's a Samaritan woman. So she's from this kind of mixed race kind of community that would have been an outcast. And Jesus goes up to her, and Jesus just talks into her life. And he basically sends her away. She becomes this great evangelist going, look, I've met this guy who's told me everything. And she tells all the people, and they come to listen to Jesus. This person who's rejected, we'd never know that story if John wasn't there. This woman who's caught in adultery, who they're ready to stone, because they're saying, well, she's messed up, she's sinned. We can stone her. And Jesus gives the classic, whoever's without the first sin, they can throw the first stone. And everyone walks away. Jesus washing feet of the disciples with all the dirt and the filth and getting down on his hands and knees and getting among it. It's only in John. And then after the resurrection, when Jesus comes back to life and the disciples go fishing, and Jesus is just there on the beach cooking some fish ready for a barbecue, and he doesn't kind of then say, well, you've abandoned me, didn't you? There I was on the cross, you abandoned me. He just wants to be with his people. And in them 4 stories, John just tells us the heart of God for the people who are broken, the people who have messed it up, the people who have made mistakes. And he tells us the heart of God is to get involved in that pain, to get involved in restoration of people, to forgive people. And so, whilst life, and it might cost a lot, but God is so faithful, his heart is so much for us, that when we do mess up, he's never going to walk out on us, and his grace is never going to run out. And as I've talked a lot about this kind of difficult kind of year and how tough it was, it's important that I need to kind of finish that story, because I've shared how it was tough and how I was tired, but I've already shared that, Anna said we were going to plant a church, and I was not in a place where I thought we were going to be able to plant a church, and so Lucas said, I think we might want to plant a church, and I was like, okay God, you know what you're doing. And then the whole youth work thing, I said, I don't want to do it, because it's painful, and I don't know how to do it. And I remember going away in January and praying about this, and going, God, we're going to do the youth work, and I think it's right that we do some youth work, but I just don't have it in me. And I remember praying, and I was at this meeting, and I was like, God, will you just help me just get a passion for this? And every time I was doing it, every time I was praying, I think about this place called West Bank in Widnes, where I used to do stuff years ago, and I started it 8 years ago. And as I was just like, God, I just need to forget about it, that's gone. And it didn't end as I kind of hoped, and it was a difficult thing in the end. And as I was praying, I was like, God, just help me get it out of my mind. And this guy at the front was just like, I just get the feeling that somebody needs something prayed for about something that started 8 years ago, and it's causing you pain. I was like, all right, God, you know what you're doing, don't you? Literally, the minute I was like, okay, God. And so God's kind of taken me through that, and the whole mentoring thing. I knew that God wanted me to do it, but I kind of looked away because I thought, I don't know what I'm going to do, I don't know how I'm going to do it. And Steve Murphy recently, over the summer, asked me to do a preach. Last minute, I was at a wedding on the 2nd of August, on my birthday. So you never want to go to a wedding on your birthday, do you? Weddings are not good. So weddings are fine, but when you're a Christian, you get 15 in a year. That can give you wedding fatigue. And so thankfully it was the second one, so I wasn't that really bitter. So I was there, and it was a Friday. Who has a wedding on a Friday? Selfish people. So I had to take a day's holiday to go to that wedding. And so I was happy. And so we were at this wedding, and Steve goes, oh, would you like to do a preach for us? About knowing God as Father. And I was thinking, oh, that is an area that I really believe in. And I said, when is it? And he went, tomorrow morning. Shut up, Steve. Tomorrow morning. And if you've ever worked at YFC, they are disorganised, but that is for them. Even that. And he was like, no, honestly, I promise you, we've asked everybody else. Cheers, Steve. And he was like, no, seriously, everybody. he starts reeling off names. I was like, you literally have asked everybody, haven't you? Cheers, Steve. I feel so important. And but at that point, as I went home from that wedding to prep it at 11 p.m, don't worry about it, Steve. As I did that, I was like, as I started doing it, I was like, God, I'm not sure I want to do this. And as I got into it, I really felt God was saying, you care about this. Yeah. Maybe it's not a coincidence that all these people, that he's asked everybody in the world, and he has asked you last minute. Because I was thinking, I haven't really done much with this. And as I did it, I was like, you need to do this mentoring thing. And like, straight away, I was like, I'd looked at a couple of mentoring schemes, and there's one in America, and there's one in England called XLP, and I'd looked at the one in England, and it's only in London. I'd emailed them a couple of times, and they were like, we just do London, we're not going to branch out. And I was like, okay. So I was like, well, I need to do this American one then. So, and you know, it cost a bit of money, so that's always an excuse to not do anything, isn't it? And you're like, oh, one day when we can afford it. And I was like, well, never going to be a good time to pay that money out. It's never going to be, oh yeah. So I was just like, I need to do this. I need to stop kind of talking about how God cares about the fatherless. If I'm going to do it, I need to start making steps. So I did that. I spoke to my boss and said, can you just not put me on any kind of Friday afternoon lectures? And then, so I started to try and free up some of my time. And so I started to think, right, do you know what, God, if we're going to do this, we're going to do this. And I had to make some practical steps. And so I preached that kind of stuff, and I was like, right, okay, God, I know I'm going to do it. And so last week we were away at Momentum. And I was just doing this preach, and I was thinking, I still don't know how this mentoring thing is going to work. I don't get it. I said, I know it's right, God, but I don't see how I'm going to do it. I'm still waiting for this stuff from America. And then literally the day I was writing this down, we went to the evening meeting, and they got this guy up from this XLP place. And it was like, we've got this mentoring scheme that we now want to send nationally. So all right then. So I was like a bullet from a gun afterwards. I was like, I'm going to them. And so I went in, and the guy was like, why do you want to do mentoring? And I literally vomited that to him for about 40 minutes. And I think he was like, all right, calm down, son. And so I was like, no, I want to do this. And so at that point, he's got some training days. And I was like, I don't know how to do it. And this guy was saying, do you know what? He was telling us how you do it. And he said, you need to get your church involved, and you just take a person each. And he said, your church will, like, you go to the school and you say, give us 5, 10 kids who are literally on the verge of exclusion. And we've got 5 or 10 mentors who will just spend a couple of hours with them every week, and we'll just spend time with them, and whatever that takes. And there's going to be obviously a lot more kind of training and stuff that comes with that. And I was like, yeah, God, I can do that. I don't know how it's going to work, but I can do that. And yeah, we're way over time. So so the final thing I just want to kind of finish us with is John. Not only does he write those books that we said, but John writes this. And John knows, he's got perspective on life, like I said, he's seen everything, he's been with Jesus, he's seen these people, he's seen all these amazing things, and John knows, and he finishes towards the end of the whole Bible with this verse. I heard a loud voice from the throne saying, look, God's dwelling place is among the people, and he will dwell with them. They will be his people, and God will be with them and be their God. He will wipe every tear from their eyes. There will be no more death or mourning or crying or pain, for the old order of things has passed away. Okay, and so we stand knowing in Jesus a character who wanted something, his people, who overcame a whole world of conflict in order that we might be called his, in order that one day we would be in that place. He doesn't promise us that we will have conflict-free lives until we get there, but we've got to know that one day we will be there. You know, and as we're going to live out our lives in story, we need to know that that is our home. If we're people of that kingdom, we need to know we carry the responsibility of living it out and carrying that kingdom to other people. And that means love. It doesn't mean big projects, or sometimes it could. It just means love of people. Okay, so I think we're finishing now. I'm going to get Pete. Is Pete, can you go and call? Lucas is walking off. I've got the mic, so it's fine. And so Pete can just play some music. We're going to finish. I'm assuming we are going to finish now, and people are going to be released for coffee. But what I would say, I'm just going to ask Pete to just stay around and play something for like 5 minutes, 10 minutes. And if people just want to just pray and reflect, because I've done this has taken me years. And I know you think, oh yeah, I need to do something about this, and then you're just going to walk away and go for coffee, we go watch the football and it's gone. You know, so I would just say for like 5-10 minutes, while everybody goes for coffee, I'd love to just pray with a couple of people, or if you just want to sit and pray yourself. I get the feeling there's people who maybe just think, I don't know what it is. I know that there's more to life, but I just don't know. And I think there's people who know what it is, like I was, but they just know it's stalled for whatever reason. I would just encourage you to speak to somebody, whether that's afterwards, whether that's somebody that you're close to, or if you just want to stay and pray, then that would be great.